Hello and welcome to another episode of the Construction Corner podcast. I'm Dylan. I'm your host. And guys, today I'm joined again by Michael Wesa. If you want to hear his bio and all the things that we talked about, that what got him here from starting as a entered apprentice electrical contractor, electrician, then going, all the way to president of MKD Electrical with $150 million in revenue. Go back and listen to last week's episode. But today, Michael and I are going to talk about hiring, recruiting, retention, all things basically around people, how to get them, how to keep them, and how to grow your company. Because you don't grow a $150 million electrical contractor with 10 guys in a pickup truck. So, you need a lot of people to do that. And Michael is just the guy to do it, especially now in his new venture in Leapros and helping you hire and recruit awesome talent. So without further ado, Michael, welcome to the show.
Awesome. Thanks, Dylan. Happy to be here.
So a good place to start in this whole kind of people conversation, right? In recruiting, hiring, and retaining talent is, where do you find these amazing people? Where is that people tree that we can just go and pluck, talented individuals off of to bring them into our companies?
Yeah. We would always talk about, the factory, right? If I could just, build a factory that could just, I'm gonna push out an electrician, I'm gonna get one every 5 minutes. And in some ways we'll talk a little bit about your factory or your tree. But when we're just talking raw recruiting, if I'm a plumbing business and I'm looking for plumbers, kind of where do I go? It's really similar. So, in the space that we're in, right? Skilled trades is a big mixture of people, and the age demographics are changing rapidly, and so there's actually a lot of different avenues of where you find people. Um, and whether you're an agency recruiting company like we are at Leapros, or a contractor like I formerly was, there's a few things that are just kind of given. So there's great tools that we've all heard of, LinkedIn, Indeed, Career Builder, ZipRecruiter, your local paper. I mean, you name it. Predominantly online. So companies need to have an online presence. I think is really a big deal. But they're going to go to these wells, if you will, these sources, and you're going to get what's really an active candidate. So somebody who's actively on the market, they're going to maybe be looking at your job postings and applying. So that's kind of a bucket of where one chunk of folks are at. There's a little bit of a fundamental flaw with and where I know we got stuck in the past as a contractor of like, well, we posted on Indeed, nobody's applying to my job. Well, there's no people out there, right? And you hear that a lot. We hear that with a lot of our customers, and there's a phrase that we talk about. It's called post and pray, right? Where I'm going to post the job description. I'm going to pray that awesome plumber is going to come and see my shiny ad, and the stars are going to align. The problem is, just like in business, you have to take control of your own destiny a little bit. And what good internal recruiting teams or external partners do is they go on offense. And so they take maybe what's coming in, and or utilizing some of those tools to actually go target folks. So let's use LinkedIn. I'm going to go use LinkedIn, and I'm going to contact literally every plumber that's on there. And what good agencies and good internal folks are doing is they're trying to make those connections, get people on the phone, and kind of they uncover a hidden bucket. And that hidden bucket typically is referrals. And so hopefully you're trying to connect with somebody live and maybe they're a fit, great. But if not, you got a buddy who might be interested, somebody that you would recommend for what we're talking about here. And so you kind of create this active process, and then you're driving referrals. And I think um, when you're just kind of talking raw recruiting and where do I go and how do I do it, the folks who are performing at a high level have people, systems, processes that are pointed more actively in addition to the kind of posting. And they have a very strong referral process, where it's not just, hey, we offer a referral bonus, but as part of your recruiting process, literally driving uh, folks recommendations and hey, could I have you the foreman that you last worked with on the last two jobs? Can I get his phone number? I want to check out his referral, like asking very specific questions to drive some of those things. So there's kind of a pool there. And then in particular in the construction industry, the apprenticeship programs, right? Many of them have been out there for a long time. Some folks have those internally. Um, so you're either making connections with these different programs, or technical schools as this different pool of candidate, but others are driving that themselves and becoming their own apprenticeship program or helping feed the program with talent. And it's a little bit of the same thing, but um, I emphasize kind of the apprenticeship program in recruiting, because of just how big the skilled trades gap is and is going to become. That if every contractor is not thinking about, hey, I need to bring on 3, 4 apprentices, 4, 5 apprentices, to kind of create this transfer of knowledge. You're going to be in a world of hurt in a really, really short order.
And this brings up, I mean, I have a lot of questions in here. Um, because it's a big thing, right? You hear the
Yeah.
published numbers of like 500,000 skilled trades people short, right,
Mhm.
across all, plumbing, electrical, HVAC, sheet metal,
Yeah.
piping, welders, all the trades. You
Yeah.
have a 500,000 person deficit from,
Yeah.
listed job, basically in job postings, right? That's how they get that number.
Mhm.
And so with that, you have obviously this big thing. And then I love the kind of examples that was done there at ABC Illinois in the fall. Was like, this might only mean that you've got 8 guys to choose from in
Yeah.
your local area, as for plumbers, right, within your a 50-mile geographic area, or whatever that kind of breaks down to for your geographic region. When you look, you know across the country, it's like, everybody, like in my little community here of call it 100,000 people, like you've got, you need 8 guys across 4 different plumbing
Yeah.
companies. There's not the talent pool here, so either you gotta bring them in, you're getting some guys out of high school to enter and kind of
Mhm.
hopefully push them into the apprentice program,
Mhm.
or you're recruiting folks that don't want to deal with the city anymore and come and work out here. So there's all those things, but I think the 2 places I'd like to kind of dig in a little more is, and we'll come back to the apprenticeship program because I think
Yeah.
that's so important, but is in building out this offensive team.
Mhm.
Where do you really recommend people start?
Sure.
Because I think that's probably the first thing they're thinking is like, okay, I know I need to go on
Yeah.
this offense thing, this job
Yeah.
posting thing, while we need to have it, isn't doing too good for us.
Yeah.
We're not getting anybody. Where do they start in kind of building that offensive team?
Yeah. Really great question. And I'd throw out my own grain of salt here, for everybody. Everything has its own degree of scale, right? So if I'm a $1 million company versus a 5, 10, 20, same concept, you're just applying a little more scale or a little more resources to it. So, you see as companies grow over time, they will make an investment. Typically, it's like a HR manager or even like an office manager who takes on some of the responsibilities. And when they're a small company, that can work. Um, and then as they grow over time, the needs of hiring become so great that they actually have to add to the team, and you will, many terms, talent acquisition or, recruiting manager, million different titles, but they're all recruiting focused folks. And so you got to kind of ask yourself where you're at, what my current skill set of the team is, and also just what time and investment I'm willing to make with the team that I have or what I'm going to put into the business. But at any rate, you have to put in the time and you have to put in the investment. So in an ideal world, if you have kind of steady needs, you're going to want to have somebody who's just focused on this as a large portion, if not all their time. And that's really one of the big differentiators, and why folks like myself now in the staffing and recruiting agency, we play a really helpful role, because not everybody can do that, right? Their business, it might kind of ebb and flow at certain times of the year, and it doesn't quite make sense for them at the moment until they get to a certain size. So you certainly can find partners, and I would encourage folks to have partners who have relevant industry experience, versus there's many different agencies out there that are just big and broad, but they don't have quite the focus or understanding. So, but not necessarily a pitch here. You want folks with experience in the role. So if your internal team doesn't have that, you might be the owner or whomever kind of help as part of the hiring process. But it's dedicating person and or time, dedicating some investment. I might have to get a LinkedIn. I might have to spend money on LinkedIn or Career Builder. I might have to dedicate my own time to help with the hiring process. I think those are some of the biggest pieces. And as you scale, you add people to that, you add more resources, you add complicated things like a applicant tracking system, so you could understand where you're at, report on where you're at. One of the challenges that the contracting world faces is they are not an agency, right? They are a contractor at heart. And so some of the things, the pace in which things happen, the metrics in which their internal recruiting teams are very different than, an external agency. Pros and cons to that, but one of the challenges is kind of understanding from a business leadership and understanding. It's hard to know whether your recruiting or talent group is actually doing anything well, without going, yeah, we really haven't hired anybody. It's more broad, not like, hey, how many submittals did we present to the hiring managers? What was the time of hire? Do we have any candidate fall off? Like, that's where more sophisticated contractors or agencies, that's where you start to kind of build some difference between the two, and just to kind of elevate their performance. And that doesn't happen overnight, but that's something that you kind of build towards as you get going. But a lot of owners go, well, my office manager is doing it. We'll see what she or he brings in, and I got to go back to estimating and making sure the guys have the tools and stuff that they need. And I would just challenge any owner, to ask, does that person have kind of the real understanding of what you need? Am I just going to give you a bunch of garbage and you're going to be frustrated? So there is some involvement, on their part. And then, as that grows, to help build out the process and bring on other folks. Eventually, if the company gets pretty significant, there's some pretty good leadership in there, but there's still involvement from hiring managers that can help tune, exactly what they're looking for to make sure people are aligning with, what the company needs. So,
Yeah, I think there's really two big things in there. One, in the beginning, I mean, your office manager might be it, or it's you, right, as
mhm.
the owner of the business.
Yep.
Um, and then the thing that comes to mind for me is that office manager, usually they're hired to do like admin tasks, right?
Mhm.
Like they're making sure that like all the things are in the office,
Yeah.
like you read ordering paper and ink and coffee and making sure all that stuff's there, that you're doing admin stuff and scheduling and maybe
Yep.
billing, invoicing, you're, half a, ARAP person. Like
That's right.
there's all the things that the office manager ends up doing. And like usually in talking to people and figuring out if they're a match for your culture, values, all the things that you want from them, that's probably not going to be office managers like talent, honestly, in, bringing those people in. But it's like, hey, I got a person, let's,
Mhm.
put them on the phone.
Yeah, you almost have to look at it like, you know, how would you feel about, handing your estimating off to, somebody, just an admin, or your project management off to just a raw admin? You need to look at recruiting, as an investment in your business, because at the end of the day, contractors, we have essentially really only a few things to sell: time and material. Whether it's lump sum or time and material, it's essentially time and material, right? So every, um, production person that I bring in, to the business is going to help me grow my business. Every kind of project management estimator is going to do the same thing. It's a different math equation, but you're really looking at production roles. So if you can get really good at hiring those roles, you're going to rev up your engine relatively quickly. This is going to allow you to grow your business if you're kind of doing it right. And your point's really valid, and I think this is where contractors really, really struggle, especially around that kind of couple $1 million, 10 million and below range. Is like, well, I don't want to make the investment in even just like an HR manager. So it just kind of whittles it down a little more, um, and then we just kind of deal with this kind of fragmented, typically very, ineffective recruiting process. So you'll see typically it's office manager, then, maybe it becomes like an HR manager role, and then eventually it will become its own recruiting or talent acquisition role because of the size and importance. But at the end of the day, you have to have people who are focused on it. They got to get your business. They got to know your culture and what you believe in and your brand. They have to be very articulate in that, and make folks feel comfortable with what your organization's all about. But it can be really powerful if you can get that right.
And with that, um, and I'll come back to the apprenticeship program, but
Yeah.
the the thing I have, and this almost goes into like the true hiring piece of it, not just recruiting and finding them and starting those conversations, but is because like you're saying, right? Like you can't, a good hire will always be worth it, right? And
Mhm.
their top performers
Yeah.
are really what drive the business, right? It's that 80-20 rule,
Mhm.
and action is the top 20% of your people are going to drive the business, and you want to just keep hiring A players um throughout the business, right? There's some roles that, I mean, it's what it is, and
Yeah.
it's not glamorous, but there's going to be other roles that if you have anything less than a talent there, it's going to really hamper you. And again, not that you want, D talent anywhere,
Yeah.
but there's certain roles that, hey, you don't need the sharpest tool in the shed for some of
Yeah.
these things, especially in construction. You need a guy that's just very good at that one thing, and that's it. But in that is in hiring people and kind of this process and referral bonuses and paying out for talent is, there's like no good way to say this, but some people are just cheap.
Yeah.
And I don't know another like better way
Yeah.
to say that they're really not willing to invest in talent. But how does this really hamper that entire process, right? You found
Yeah.
great people, you've spent all this money on either internal or external recruiters and helping you find all this great talent. And then when it comes to the goal line, you're
Hmm.
just like, whatever, 5 grand, 10 grand cheap
Hmm.
on, an A player.
Yeah.
What do you see in that realm of stuff? And again, not that companies are made of money or anything like that, right? It's the numbers have to pencil out for having that person, but at the
Yeah.
same time, there's this kind of balance there of, paying for talent.
Oh yeah. I think we see it in a variety of forms and fashions where you get some folks just kind of like stuck. Like I'm not going one penny over this per hour, and we just let this rock star, walk away, which could have brought in several $100,000 to your company. And so you're going to lose a rock star over one penny, but you could have gained a couple $100,000. But it's easy for folks to kind of get stuck in that trap. I think one of the easiest ways to break through it is to force yourself to just make the investment, take the risk, right? And if it doesn't pan out, you're going to know right away, and we make a change. But it's not just pay, especially right now. The work from home dynamic is all over the map, and so you see some contractors, very old school. It's 100% in office, and and then you have others that are just 100% remote. I'm not saying there's a right or wrong, but just from a candidate's perspective, we're in a very competitive environment, and um, it's only going to get more competitive. So if we're not being flexible on some of these things, then somebody else is going to be, and we're going to be losing candidates for your roles. And ultimately that's going to jeopardize your business. So you got to almost define what your hard truths are as a company as part of the recruiting process, but also you have to have some flexibility, and there's always a give and a take. And then as it relates to pay, I think one of the challenges that our industry faces is there's just kind of a lack of awareness, if you will. I mean, generally, you can go on payrate.com, and some of those things are kind of wildly inaccurate. You can look at what union scale is, right? But if you're a non-union firm, how does that apply to them? There's some resources that are out there, but they're not always up to date. So what does that mean? That means in your recruiting process, again, there's some laws about what you can and can't ask, but there's also ways in which you can ask to get at the same information. Um, you can get a sense of what the market is, but you also have to recognize that's always moving. So as soon as you look at the data, it's dead, right? So, and another piece to this that we talk about a lot, is really around, you have to zoom out 30,000 feet. If the construction industry is 500,000 people short, and that's only going to get worse. And I also know, because they do a good job of publishing that, the local unions are doing X, Y, and Z, and I can look at the prevailing wage rates to see where they're pushing the rates. Am I the only one facing this problem? No, I'm not. So we get stuck as like, well, shit, I estimated this work at X, Y, and Z. And that's where that fear comes in. Like, I'm going to lose money if I raise my rates. Um, I think there's a balance that has to get struck with that, but just know that you're not alone is my broader point. So Yes, we're not going to double somebody's pay. I'm not suggesting that, but we can be really competitive and certainly don't lose somebody over a penny, right? Or a couple bucks or a couple grand even. Um, and what that will force you to do is develop a process where we're looking at this on some regular interval. And then you're going to take that process and then go over to your estimating team and insert the inputs from that process. And you're going to update your comp, right? And how you estimate to make sure you don't have any gaps. One of the other things that we sometimes miss as a contractor is we fail to think about the productivity. So we just think of the raw dollar, X dollars per hour. Oh my God, this comp rate's going to be up. You're not thinking about what if this guy's twice as productive as, the other person. It's hard to fully gauge that, and that's more the investment or the risk. But I would just encourage people to even think about questions around productivity on certain roles, because that changes the math equation. So, but you kind of need to take all this together. You have to build a process of understanding where the comp is, where it's going. So then you can take that from a business standpoint and make changes in your estimating process. So you're not losing gross profit or net income.
Oh man, there's so much in here. Well, because I mean, you bring up a good point. I think this is all again tied to having an apprenticeship program, right? Having training programs within
Yeah.
your firm and bringing in people, getting them up to, what is your base rate for productivity, and
Mm-hmm.
how do you measure that? Is it in feet of pipe, laid per day? Is it in
Mm-hmm.
sheet metal done? Is it in circuits terminated? Like,
Yeah.
what are we talking about from
Yeah.
productivity? What does that mean? What phase of the job are you in? Is this guy just better at terminations than in bending pipe? Right. There's all these different productivity measures that you can have on a person, but if you're doing
Mm-hmm.
also like six different things in a day on a job site, well, now your numbers are garbage for
Yep.
what
Yep.
that productivity rate looks like. Cause hey, he did six different things. It took him whatever, half an hour to just set the tools up to do the job for
Yep.
the 2 hours you had him doing that. Right. So there's a lot of things that go into like a productivity number. But at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, I think it's so important to have, and as well as breaking it down per kind of general bucket of task,
Yeah.
because one thing is very different than the other. Pulling wire is very different than hanging conduit.
That's right.
Those are two very different things. And some guys, one guy might be great at one and bad at the other. And so then it's knowing where do you put that guy, the right person in the right seat
Yeah.
for the job. And so the thing that I pulled out of this was, yeah, in your time and material, right? Some person can be twice as productive. That is very real in
Mhm.
what you can have for that. But really, how do you tie a lot of this all together? You're gonna recruit talent, and how does um, kind of the training programs that you may or may not offer
Yeah.
pull into recruiting better talent, to having a better hiring conversation where, hey, you're coming in, let's say at that apprentice level, or maybe you just got your journeyman's card, but you want to move up through the ranks. And here's the tiers that we have. So maybe we start you at a little lower dollar value, but here's like the clear milestones that we have to move you
Oh
up
yeah.
to the pay rate that you want or better than that.
Yeah.
And we do that very quickly. Here's how many promotions we've given. Like, kind of,
Yeah.
if you would talk about that whole kind of cycle and bringing a lot of this together, because nothing kind of lives in a vacuum. They don't live
Oh
in
yeah.
isolation. And I mean, I'm taking a ton of notes over here, but it's
Yeah.
like, you have your recruiting conversation, but how does training and retention kind
Yeah.
of tie into the conversations that the recruiters can have to attract better talent into your organization?
Yeah, and you almost have to back all the way up, right? When we got to a really good state, um, we paused, worked with our foreman and leadership team to really assess, what does an apprentice electrician do?
Mm.
Are there different levels to that? What does a journeyman electrician do? What different levels are there? So what we ended up doing was building out not a scale, but really just different tiers for each role, meant for performance management, compensation. Where our folks, our superintendents, could meet with, entry level or entry level journeyman electrician, new to the organization, say, hey, you're coming in here. This is what we expect out of our foreman, right? Because we know you said you wanted to be a foreman. And so this is what we're going to work on, to kind of get you here, right? And so spending the time to pencil some of these things out then allows you to kind of take that into the recruiting process and kind of gauge folks. So that's kind of one thing. Um, we looked at pay and pay ranges within that as well. But that's kind of the recruiting big block. And there's a lot of pieces, like we were just saying, lots of pieces to it. But that's only for the percentage of folks who are not, who are essentially just, off of work or something happened, right? That's a really small bucket, as we know, with how tight that labor pool is, right? So we as companies, we need to do actually a couple things well. We need to do that well, high class, as best as we possibly can. But then we also have to be willing to invest in the business. And we looked at that internally. We wanted to bring that in-house, since we built an in-house apprenticeship program. But there's great organizations out there. Some folks end up kind of tweaking some of the third party, whether it's ABC or some technical school. But the point is, you need to build a farm team. I mean, that's why the MLB does it. That's why, Fortune 500s have large internship programs. It's the same concept, because that's the only way we're going to kind of keep up with our pipeline and also our growth. And one of the powerful things that you're able to do with that, once it gets rolling, is you're building your machine, your tree that we talked about at the very beginning, right? You're able to say, this is who we are. This is what we believe in. This is how we think and care about safety. And we're willing to invest in you, and we're going to put folks through training. So when we did that and made that shift internally, we had first year was a failure. We lost 70% of the first year's class. 30% were great and was awesome. But we looked at, why did that happen? And what we started was just literally person by person, understanding why they weren't here anymore. And what we learned from that process, and also feedback from leaders and foremen, was the first year class doesn't necessarily need to be the traditional approach. And so we changed the actual structure, where folks were coming in a dedicated boot camp for 6 to 8 weeks, 40 hours a week. And that's what worked for us. And people can scale that, to their own needs. But where there's dedicated time for when they're learning something, they're going to learn that kind of first year stuff, all of it, all at one time. So when they go to the foreman and the foreman goes, hey kid, can you bend me a stub 90? They're not like, what's a stub? Where is it? I'll go find it somewhere. You cut down the 15 million questions that just by just showing up and learning on the job, learning approach, can happen. So that was a big improvement. But probably the biggest was literally we articulated a profile of who we wanted to hire. What did that person look like from a personality and fit? And what were our interview questions that we were asking, and could we change them to better identify folks in that profile? And so we basically threw out our interview process and retweaked it, and we started looking for people with the right profile. And between that and really bringing it into a boot camp style where they just learn so much, we transformed the apprenticeship program, and it became a powerhouse for us. And we were bringing on 25, 30 students, sometimes twice a year, and really helped drive a lot of our growth, and is wildly successful. You get to witness people who had no industry experience, maybe came from not the greatest of backgrounds, and completely change their life and get into a great trade and learn something phenomenal. And now we're just doing wonderfully well. So very powerful for a lot of reasons.
Man, I love that. And with the boot camp, this was mostly for just apprentices. That was kind of entry level apprentices that would come in, learn kind of the trade, the craft, 6 weeks
Yeah.
in dedicated classroom time.
Yeah. So, I mean, we were, electrical contractors. So Chicagoland area, industrial, focused, right? So we had some specific things we wanted our apprentices to do. So, safety, huge component, right? So we spent a lot of time in safety. We, we spent a lot of time identifying and understanding the material. A lot of times a first year apprentice is the runner, going and getting material. So if they know what it is, they can probably do that a little bit better. Tools and equipment, what they are, how to use them safely. And then really from there, now the rubber starts meeting the road. What are some of the tasks that a first year apprentice electrician, we want them to do? Okay. How do we build a strut rack? How do they cut strut? How do they, assemble it? Um, how do they set up, a wire pull? Are they able to make a head properly? Can they do that efficiently? Can they bend conduit? Can they bend conduit? Can they bend conduit? And for us, conduit was a big deal. And so we're learning these kind of big blocks again. So when they hit the field, they're not scratching their head and all learning right then and there and really pulling the productivity down. And by no means are they a level of a journeyman electrician, but they are very proficient coming out of that boot camp. And we would treat that boot camp like a job. So it had a start time, breaks, end time, and we would track, particularly when they got to the meatier things, really the wire pulling and conduit. We're literally tracking productivity by individual, by team. We have a competition that we had a competition at the end for safety, quality, and speed. So they get used to what it's like being out on a job site. And they know that there's going to be some level of production that they're going to hear the foreman talk about and things like that. So yeah, really, really powerful stuff. And those folks perform at such a high level. So every business can take this and tweak it, right? Might not need to be as long as it is, or there might be more commercial things in your space. Or if you're a plumber, it's the same concept, but it's just, what do you want that first year apprentice really to hit the ground running with and start identifying? And I encourage every contractor, talk to your foreman, pull all your foremen into a foreman's meeting when you are thinking about doing this, and really build this out.
I love it. With that, in the kind of 6 weeks that you had with them, was that ultimately a you gained productivity on the other side of it, right? So kind of
Yeah.
before and after standing this up, if you have the metrics for it, was doing all this to where you had that 6 weeks. Obviously, you're paying them all that kind of good stuff, but did productivity on the job sites increase that dramatically? Because now you're putting in a qualified individual right onto the job site. They don't have to ask all these questions. They're not interrupting the foreman. So when they do get deployed out to a job, they're going to
Mhm.
be actually valuable, to the team and producing. So were your metrics just that much better to where this became, I won't say a profit center, but like a profitable endeavor to train them in that controlled environment before putting them out onto site?
Oh yeah, it was undoubtedly significantly more productive. There were we had less safety injuries, which, again, just learning the tools, equipment, how to use. So that was a huge thing, right? We don't want people getting hurt. Um, and then from a production standpoint, very, very productive, as productive as a random journeyman that we were hiring off the street. And that really was kind of like, oh, wow. A little bit of a light bulb moment, for us, like, hey, we're still gonna hire journeymen off the street, but this is clearly also working, well, and why we continue to pour into that.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
really cool. And with the standing up list program, I think this is probably, guys, like this is the biggest nugget you're gonna get out of this podcast is like having a real training program, what it can do for you, why it's so important. But my other question on the other side of this is, what were your retention numbers like for those guys that went through that boot camp,
Yeah.
right?
So we really did a lot of things. That upfront stuff dramatically helped, but then we also created a few things like a retention bonus, for folks. We want to encourage them to get through the program, get your DOL and NCCR journeyman's card, and then we gave you a bonus at the end of that to celebrate that. So um, you know 90%, retention, some years plus or minus, but in general, a really, really high retention rate. um, and then the same conversation we had before, um, comp has changed and continues to change, and so you also have to not forget about your entry level folks as it relates to that, and kind of where they're at in comparison to a journeyman. And what we were finding is our folks were highly trained and doing really well, and they'd get to about a third year, and a lot of folks were talking to them, right? And so we ended up kind of shifting our comp, and making sure for folks, really want to have a long, career at our company.
No, I mean these are the key points, guys. I mean, like building an internal recruiting team or and working with partners and probably some combination thereof as
Yep.
you scale. I think that's and let's quickly go back on that. Do you see most companies doing kind of a hybrid approach once they get to be, that maybe 10 million and up size, or um
Oh yeah, even the big guys, right? Your top E&R contractors. There's so much activity going on, even for them with big recruiting and talent teams, that they're looking for help, and it might just be in different roles or more pointed, but in general, it tends to be very much a hybrid, a solution for a lot of folks, and some that depends on the business type and needs, where there might be more reliance on third parties, if the needs are just really, really massive, and the company, maybe that ebbs and flows, right? And so that's kind of the judgment call a lot of times clients are making. But short answer is yes, is very much a hybrid across the board.
Yeah. So in that is not only do you need to build a good internal team, you've got to be able to work well with partners
Yeah.
in
Oh yeah.
everything that you're doing from a, recruiting and just talent acquisition standpoint. Like you've got to have your internal metrics style to work with your partners,
Hmm.
share that information probably back and forth on metrics and making sure that your
Yeah.
internal team's hitting the right stuff, your external partners are hitting the right numbers and metrics. And that's really my biggest takeaway from most of this is how many things that you guys ended up tracking, right?
Oh
From
yeah.
uh, all the things in your talent pool, all the stuff with your apprentices, and what they can do, all of your productivity rates on job sites. And so I think from both the recruiting, right, then hiring, looking at wage rates that are in the market, other benefits, bonuses, all those things for guys, what their truck stipend is, or do they get a truck? At what point do they get a truck? All those things end up being really important. And then for retention is, ongoing training, again, making sure that pay rates are good or better than the industry across the board, because again, you're putting more into your people. So you should be getting more out of them.
Hmm.
And then making sure that, again, those productivity rates, if you're training your people, they might be, again, like you were saying, those apprentices that went through the boot camp are as good as a journeyman off the street. Well, that's 2 3 years, to the good for doing
Hmm.
that boot camp program.
That's
Like
right.
that's a lot of time, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's very impactful, and I want to hop on one thing you said really around the retention, and that's kind of the other stool to the leg, leg to the stool, if you will. Um, we are in an industry that at times the process is very transactional, right? We do a takeoff, we develop an estimate, we get it out the door, and so we're kind of always doing a lot of different things, and whether it's recruiting or sales or what have you, the high class, excellent contractors are different because they have a focus, and their focus is on relationships and people. And whether that's sales and your client, or our topic today, recruiting and retention, you see the top. I'd encourage everybody, pick 5 of the top E&R contractors and go on their LinkedIn for 1 hour and just scroll. And what you will notice is their LinkedIn is all about their people and their company and their culture and celebrating those things. And what they're doing is they're building a brand. And the excellent contractors understand this. They understand branding, and they're going to utilize those tools, but really they understand people and the importance of those relationships. And that's what this industry ultimately is about. And so you, as a leader within your organization, need to make an investment of your time, energy, money to invest in your people, and that can be in the form of training. But honestly, it's really the time, being present, being out and about on job sites, or working with your teams here and there. Um, go a tremendous, way to building, excellent culture. And the more you can do that, and your management team do that and support that as part of your culture, what you see is great companies where these brands kind of naturally form, where their employees would literally tattoo the company's logo on their body, or they're so proud to be a part of that organization that, I mean, yeah, 1 cent an hour, get lost. Like, I'm happy here. We're doing awesome projects. We're doing these great things. They've put me and my family through this and that, right? They buy into the brand. What the challenge is, one, our process in general sometimes can get transactional. So we have to kind of naturally fight against that. Two, the industry's had consolidation. There's been different players and investment partners that have now come into the mix in the industry broadly. that don't share that same philosophy. And so, but what you do is you see great companies caring about their people and pouring into them. And that's one of the only ways, you're gonna not only attract folks, to be a brand magnet, if you will, but that's how you're going to get folks to stay. Show up on the job site and with a cup of coffee and ask somebody how their weekend was and what their family's up to. Um, if you've not done that, try it, and I'm guessing the reaction will be generally pretty positive. So.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's caring, right? You got to really care about your people, your processes, the metrics, track them, have all that data available. But at the end of the day, it's mattering about the people.
Yeah.
Are they improving? Are they growing? Are they getting paid well?
Right.
All those things matter
Yeah.
a ton. And so, to be cognizant of our time here today, I mean, there's so much here, guys. Like, this is clearly, we just scratched the surface on, the three biggest buckets in people, right? And recruiting them and hiring them, getting actually them to make the leap over to your firm, and then to retain them, right? Those are three big buckets with three different kind of skills associated with them, and finding people, getting them across the goal line, and then keeping them once you do get them in the door. So again, this is huge buckets. Hopefully Michael will come back and we'll talk more about some of this stuff, or um, you know, we'll go down some of these other paths in the future. But again, this has been hugely beneficial. And Michael, I just want to thank you for coming on and sharing all this knowledge that you learned really in the trenches, and growing a firm to 150 million. I mean, that doesn't happen by accident, and it doesn't happen without clearly training a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. It's a lot of fun talking on this.
Awesome. Well, guys, that is this episode of the Construction Corner podcast. And until next time.